Today, we're going to look at a rather radical approach to mental well-being. One called acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT for short. Now, this approach doesn't promise to eliminate your pain. Instead, it offers something much more profound, and I think much more realistic: the freedom to build a meaningful life, even with pain as an unavoidable part of the journey.
So let's start with a fundamental question, one that life poses to every single one of us. When those difficult thoughts and feelings show up, and they always do, anxiety, shame, grief, doubt, what are you going to do about them? The way you answer this, whether you realize you're answering it or not, really can change the entire direction of your life. You see, ACT's founder, Dr. Stephen Hayes, points out that our minds are absolutely brilliant problem-solving machines. But when we apply that same problem-solving logic to our inner world of emotions, the answers we get are often the very ones that lead us deeper into suffering. He suggests that a much more powerful, more effective answer is already lying within us. So, to really understand ACT, we first have to get a handle on what it sees as the universal root of so much of our struggle. It all begins with what we could call the fundamental human problem. The starting point for ACT is a simple, and let's be honest, an uncomfortable truth. Pain is not a mistake. It's not a sign that you're broken or that you've done something wrong. Pain in all its many forms, disappointment, loss, fear, rejection, is a normal, unavoidable feature of a full human life. So trying to live a life that is completely free of it, well, that's chasing an illusion. So naturally, when these difficult feelings arise, our mind does what it has evolved to do best. It identifies a problem and immediately tries to solve it. You know, if there's a thorn in your foot, the solution is simple. You pull it out. And our mind applies this exact same external world logic to our internal world, kicking into high gear with what seems like a perfectly logical plan. And that problem-solving mind basically gives us three main strategies. First, we run. We try to escape the feeling through distraction, work, drinking, you name it. Second, we fight. We try to suppress our emotions, wrestle them into submission, argue with our own thoughts. Or third, we hide. We start avoiding any people, places, or situations that might trigger the feeling, and in doing so, our world gets smaller and smaller. This brings us to a central paradox in the human experience, something ACT calls the control trap. Because here's the thing, this seemingly logical approach of running, fighting, and hiding, it just doesn't work for our inner worlds. In fact, it's the very thing that creates a vicious cycle, one that turns normal, everyday pain into chronic, life-altering suffering. Now, there's a formal term for this. It's called experiential avoidance, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's the constant attempt to control, alter, or get rid of our private experiences, our thoughts, our feelings, our memories, even when the very act of struggling with them causes us real harm and pulls us further away from the life we actually want to live. In this, right here, is the absolute core principle of ACT. The problem is not the anxiety itself. The problem is not the sadness. The problem is the desperate, exhausting, and ultimately futile struggle against that pain. The very attempt to control unwanted feelings is precisely what gives them their power over us. ACT has a great metaphor to illustrate this. Imagine you're in a tug-of-war with a big, ugly monster. Let's call him anxiety. And between you and the monster is a bottomless pit. So you pull on this rope with all your might, but the harder you pull, the harder the monster pulls back. You're locked in this exhausting, endless struggle, and you're not going anywhere. You're just getting more tired and more stuck. The only winning move is not to pull harder. It's to drop the rope. And you should know, this isn't just some abstract theory. The founder of ACT, Dr. Stephen Hayes, he discovered this trap firsthand. As a young, successful psychologist, he began a years-long descent into a severe panic disorder that threatened to completely dismantle his entire life and career. He did all the things that seemed logical. He ran from any situation that might trigger a panic attack. He fought his anxious thoughts, arguing with them, trying to reason them away. He hid from the world, his life becoming more and more constrained. And the more he did all of this, the more the panic attacks grew in frequency and intensity. He was completely caught in that tug-of-war with his own mind. This downward spiral eventually led to a moment of absolute crisis, a rock-bottom experience that, it turns out, became the very birthplace of ACT. It's where he finally made a promise to himself to simply stop running. As he tells it, he found himself on the floor one night, utterly convinced he was having a fatal heart attack. But in that moment, some other part of him knew this wasn't death. It was just, in his words, another level down of hell. And right there, in that moment of complete surrender, a new and different voice emerged from within him. And from some deep, quiet part of himself, a new promise was made. It wasn't a plan to defeat his pain. It wasn't a new strategy to win the tug of war. It was simply a promise to stop running from his own experience. It was a commitment to finally turn towards himself, not away from himself. This was the moment that he, metaphorically, dropped the rope. And that promise, well, it represents the fundamental pivot at the very heart of ACT. The old goal, the one that doesn't work, is control, to eliminate pain, to change how you feel, and to treat your mind like an enemy that has to be defeated. The new goal is totally different. It's about living a full, rich life with your pain, by changing your relationship to it, by learning to work with your mind as an ally, not against it. Okay, so if the goal is to stop running and drop the rope, how in the world do you actually do that? Well, ACT is a skills-based approach. It teaches 6 core skills that are all designed to build one powerful overarching capacity. And that capacity is called psychological flexibility. Now that might sound a bit academic, but what it really means is the ability to connect with the present moment, to see what's really here, right now, and then choose your next action based on your values, based on what truly matters to you, not based on what your fleeting feelings are telling you to do. It's being open and present and doing what matters, even when your mind is screaming at you to run. So, these 6 interconnected skills are really the practical toolkit of ACT. You have acceptance, which is about making room for difficult feelings instead of fighting them. There's cognitive diffusion, which is a fancy way of saying learning to see your thoughts as just thoughts, not as absolute truths or commands. There's being present, which anchors you in the here and now instead of being lost in the past or future. Self as context helps you connect to that quiet, observing part of you. And all of this is in service of the last 2, clarifying your values, what you want your life to be about, and then taking committed action toward them. Now, to see how all of these skills really work together in practice, let's turn to probably the most iconic ACT metaphor of them all. It's the metaphor of driving your own bus. So, how do you actually live this out? How do you move your life toward what's meaningful to you when all of those difficult thoughts and feelings are still along for the ride? Because remember, the goal isn't to get rid of them. The goal is to live your life anyway. I want you to imagine for a moment that your life is a bus. It's your bus. And on this bus, there is only one driver. You are the one behind the wheel. You are the only one who can steer it, who can hit the accelerator, who can apply the brakes. The direction your bus is heading, that's determined by your values, by what's truly important to you. Now, your passengers are all of your thoughts, your feelings, your memories. And some of these passengers are unruly. You've got the anxiety passenger yelling that you're going to crash. You've got the self-doubt passenger screaming that you're a terrible driver. Now, here's the key. You can't throw them off the bus. In fact, trying to fight with them just brings the bus to a screeching halt. The goal is to let them make all their noise in the back while you keep your hands firmly on the wheel, driving in the direction that matters to you. And this really is the liberating truth at the heart of ACT. Those unruly passengers, your thoughts, your fears, your doubts, they cannot actually drive your bus. They can make a tremendous amount of noise, they can threaten you, they can distract you, but they cannot physically grab the wheel. They only get control over your life's direction when you pull the bus over and hand them the keys. So the question is, will you?
The tide brings what the shore desires.
And leaves behind what is no longer needed. So this was a quick introduction. We will now dig deeper into the subject.
Stay with us.
Today, we're exploring a question that life, well, it seems to pose to every single one of us. It shapes how we move through the world. It's about those moments when we face difficult thoughts, uncomfortable feelings, maybe shame or anxiety or that nagging self-doubt. The real question is, what are you going to do about them?
It really is fundamental, isn't it? These experiences are just part of being human, and our first instinct, often quite automatic, is to try and run or fight or maybe hide from that discomfort.
We try to fix it like it's an external problem.
Exactly. We apply that problem-solving logic. But the catch is, when we apply it to our internal world, that very effort to control or eliminate these feelings can paradoxically make things worse. It digs us deeper into the distress rather than leading us out. A bit like, well, struggling in quicksand.
It suggests a whole different way of relating to our inner stuff, not by trying to get rid of pain, but by making space for it so we can still live a rich, meaningful life.
And what's really fascinating is how ACT represents quite a significant evolution in psychological treatment. Many therapies are focused primarily on reducing symptoms. Less anxiety, less depression equals feeling better.
Which makes sense on the surface.
It does. But ACT, while it often leads to symptom reduction, aims for something broader, increasing what's called psychological flexibility. This isn't just about gritting your teeth and bearing discomfort. It's about fully connecting with the present moment and consciously choosing actions that align with your core values, even when difficult thoughts and feelings show up.
Psychological flexibility, that sounds key. But what does that actually look like in practice? For someone listening, what does that mean day to day?
Right. Think of it as mental agility. It's your capacity to adapt to life's inevitable ups and downs. It means being able to shift your perspective when needed, to really notice what's happening, and crucially, to act in ways that matter to you, even if your mind is screaming otherwise.
So it's about not letting those internal states rigidly dictate your behavior.
Precisely. It allows you to either stick with a course of action that serves your values, or change course if needed, without being paralyzed by fear or doubt. If connection is important to you, psychological flexibility helps you pick up the phone, even when your mind offers a dozen reasons not to. You notice the thoughts, maybe feel the anxiety, and make the call anyway.
Many people know CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. How does ACT differ? What's the key distinction from those earlier ways?
That's a great question, because the difference is fundamental. So the first wave was mainly behaviorism, learning through association and consequence. The second wave, classic CBT, brought in cognition, identifying and changing faulty or irrational thoughts. The idea was change the thought, change the feeling.
Right, challenge the negative thinking.
Yes. Now ACT, as part of the third wave, takes a different tack. Instead of battling the content of your thoughts, trying to argue yourself out of feeling like a failure, for instance, ACT focuses on changing your relationship to those thoughts and feelings. It teaches you skills to just notice them, accept their presence without buying into them, and unhook from their influence. It's less about changing the thought itself and more about changing its power over you.
So less about winning the argument with your mind, more about stepping back from the argument altogether.
You've got it. Like learning to let the waves pass, rather than trying to stop the ocean.
So, if ACT isn't about eliminating pain, and it's about changing our relationship with it, what's the actual problem it's trying to solve? Because, let's be honest, when we feel grief or intense anxiety, it sure feels like the pain itself is the enemy.
That's the common sense view, isn't it? But ACT starts with a really radical premise. Pain is normal. Grief, anxiety, disappointment, even physical pain. These are unavoidable parts of a full human life. Trying to live a life completely free of pain, that's not just impossible, it actually sets you up for more suffering.
Because the real source of psychological suffering, according to ACT, isn't the pain itself, it's
what we do about the pain. Specifically, it's something called experiential avoidance.
experiential avoidance. Sounds technical, but I suspect we all do it. What does that look like?
Oh, it's ubiquitous. Essentially, it's any attempt to avoid, suppress, control, or get rid of unwanted private experiences. Thoughts, feelings, memories, sensations, even when doing so causes harm in the long run.
So, not just the obvious things, like drinking too much to numb feelings.
Right, that's an overt form. But it's also much subtler. Constant worry, endlessly ruminating on a problem as if thinking harder will solve an emotion. Distracting yourself by scrolling social media for hours, staying overly busy to avoid quiet moments, procrastination. These are all forms of experiential avoidance. We're trying to apply that external world strategy, avoid the hot stove, to our internal world where it just doesn't work the same way.
Which leads to the paradox of control, that idea that the harder you try not to think about something or try to push a feeling away,
the bigger and stickier it becomes.
Yeah.
It's the pink elephant in the room. Tell someone, don't think of a pink elephant, and what happens? That very instruction guarantees it pops into mind. Trying to suppress a feeling often gives it more importance, more power, and it ends up restricting your life as you organize everything around avoiding it.
It's a trap we set for ourselves.
Precisely. And it consumes so much energy that could be going towards building a life you actually value. This often leads to a key moment in therapy called creative hopelessness.
That sounds bleak.
It sounds bleak, but it's actually incredibly freeing. It's not about giving up on life. It's about helping someone see really clearly how their current strategies for dealing with pain, the avoidance, the control attempts, haven't worked. They've often come at a huge cost.
So it's giving up on what doesn't work.
Exactly. Giving up the struggle, giving up the unworkable agenda of trying to feel good all the time. When you truly see that the old way is a dead end, you become open, genuinely open to trying something different, something like acceptance.
Okay, that makes sense. It's strategically letting go of the losing battle. And to clarify this struggle, ACT uses terms like clean versus dirty discomfort. Could you break that down?
Yes, that's a really helpful distinction. Clean discomfort is the natural, unavoidable pain of life. The sadness of loss, the sting of rejection, the physical ache of an injury. It just is.
The price of admission for a meaningful life, maybe?
You can put it that way. Now, dirty discomfort is all the extra suffering we pile on top through our reaction to the clean discomfort. It's the self-criticism for feeling anxious. I shouldn't feel this way. The rumination about why something bad happened. Why me? It's not fair. The anger about being sad. It's the suffering generated by fighting reality.
So ACT aims to reduce the dirty discomfort, the suffering about suffering, rather than eliminate the unavoidable clean discomfort.
That's the core idea. You learn to relate differently to the clean discomfort, so you don't add that extra layer of struggle.
Now, you mentioned ACT is grounded in a theory called relational frame theory, RFT. This apparently explains why our human minds get so easily tangled up in this struggle. It sounds complex. Can you give us the accessible version?
Right, RFT can definitely feel a bit academic, but the core idea is actually quite simple and uniquely human. Our minds constantly make connections between things, even arbitrarily. Through language, we learn that A relates to B and B relates to C, and our mind automatically figures out A relates to C and C relates back to A without direct experience.
Like word association.
It's much more complex, but that's part of it. If you hear lemon, you might think yellow, sour, maybe even pucker up slightly. The word triggers a network of relations. This ability is incredible. It allows language, planning, problem solving, it builds civilization, but it's also a trap.
Okay, here's the downside. How does this amazing ability trip us up?
Because the functions of things can transfer through these language networks. If a child learns a spider is dangerous, that fear function can spread to things merely related to spiders, pictures, basements, even the word itself, without any bad encounters. This leads directly to what ACT calls cognitive fusion.
Fusion, like being stuck to our thoughts.
Exactly. We get so entangled with our thoughts that we treat them as literal truths, objective reality, or commands we have to obey. The thought, I am a failure, stops being just words in our head and becomes our identity. We fuse with the story.
And if you're fused with a thought like anxiety is unbearable, then avoiding anxiety at all costs becomes the only logical thing to do, even if it shrinks your world.
Precisely. RFT explains how language itself creates these traps. And it means ACT isn't just a random collection of techniques. It's grounded in a scientific understanding of how language works and how to change the function of thoughts, their impact on us, by changing the context in which we hold them, rather than just wrestling with their content. It's about loosening that fusion.
Okay, so RFT tells us why we get stuck. Now, how does ACT actually help us build that psychological flexibility? This brings us to the practical toolkit, the hexaflex.
The hexaflex, yes. It's a model representing 6 core processes or skill sets that work together. It's not linear steps 1 through 6. Think of it more like an interconnected ecosystem.
An ecosystem of flexibility, I like that.
Exactly. Developing these skills helps you become open, more present, and more engaged in building a life that truly matters to you. They all support and enhance each other, like different muscles working together for overall strength.
And those 6 are acceptance, cognitive diffusion, contact with the present moment, self as context, values, and committed action. So for you listening, we're going to take a closer look now at each of these pillars, exploring how they work together to really shift things. Let's start with contact with the present moment. This sounds like mindfulness, essentially.
It is a form of mindfulness, yes. It's about deliberately bringing your attention flexibly, without judgment, to your experience right here, right now. Both what's happening inside your thoughts, feelings, sensations, and what's happening around you.
And the point isn't just relaxation.
Relaxation can happen, which is nice, but it's not the primary goal in ACT. The function of present moment awareness here is to increase your conscious awareness so you can make choices based on your values, rather than just reacting automatically based on old habits or fleeting feelings. It's about waking up to your life as it's happening.
So many of us live in our heads, lost in past regrets or future worries.
Constantly. This is about grounding yourself in the only time you ever actually live, right now.
Let's try a quick taste of this. For everyone listening, just take a moment, settle in, maybe take a slightly deeper breath, and just notice right now 5 things you can see around you. Don't analyze, just notice. Short pause. Now shift your awareness. What are 4 things you can physically feel? The pressure of your seat, maybe the air temperature. Short pause. Now listen. What are 3 distinct sounds you can hear right now? Short pause. And 2 things you can smell, even subtle scents. Short pause. And finally, 1 thing you can taste. Short pause. See how that brief exercise just pulled your attention right here? That's the essence of contacting the present.
That's a perfect example. And it doesn't always have to be a formal exercise. There's also mindfulness with a small m, bringing that curious awareness into everyday activities. Noticing the warmth of the water washing dishes, feeling your feet on the ground as you walk, truly tasting your coffee instead of gulping it down while thinking about your to-do list.
Just asking yourself, what am I noticing right now throughout the day?
Exactly. Integrating it into life rather than needing a special time or place. And of course, the breath is always available as an anchor. When the mind wanders, as it inevitably does, you gently notice and guide attention back to the physical sensation of breathing in and out.
It's a constant point of return.
It is. Though it's important to remember, especially with formal practices like body scans, they need tailoring. For someone with trauma, focusing intently on body sensations might be overwhelming. So maybe starting with external sounds or sights is better. The goal is always psychological flexibility in your life, not achieving some perfect meditative state.
Okay, moving to the next pillar. Self as context. This one often feels a bit more abstract, doesn't it? The idea that you are not your thoughts or feelings, but the space in which they occur.
It can feel abstract initially, yes. We often call it the observing self, or the you that notices. It's pointing to that aspect of your consciousness that is aware of your experiences, but is distinct from them. You have thoughts, but you aren't your thoughts. You have feelings, but you aren't your feelings. You are the context, the awareness in which these things arise and pass away.
Like the stage, not the actors on it.
That's a good way to put it. It fosters a sense of a stable, continuous self that isn't defined or damaged by the ever-changing flow of internal weather. It's the perspective from which you can actually do acceptance and diffusion effectively. If you can notice a thought, you aren't fused with it.
ACT uses some powerful metaphors to make this more concrete. Could you share 1 or 2?
Absolutely. A classic one is the sky and the weather metaphor. Your thoughts, feelings, sensations, they're like the weather. Clouds, storms, sunshine, fog, constantly changing, sometimes intense. But you, the observing self, are the sky, the vast, stable, unchanging sky that holds all the weather. The sky isn't harmed by the storm, is it?
No, it just contains it. That's quite calming.
It can be. It suggests an inherent stability within you, regardless of internal turmoil. Another one is the chessboard metaphor. Imagine your thoughts and feelings are the black and white chess pieces, constantly warring, pulling you into the conflict. We often identify with the pieces, I am this anxious thought. But you're not the pieces, you're the chessboard itself. The board holds the conflict, allows the game to play out, but it remains undamaged by the battle.
So the question becomes, who is noticing this?
Exactly. Who is the you that is aware of this thought, this feeling? Connecting with that observer perspective provides distance and stability.
It creates that space Viktor Frankl talked about between stimulus and response.
It does. We also use perspective-taking exercises, like asking, what would your wiser self advise you right now? Or imagine watching this situation like a movie, what do you see? These help loosen rigid self-concepts and cultivate that observer stance. It's not about detaching in an unhealthy way, it's about anchoring in a stable, aware part of yourself.
Okay, let's turn to acceptance. We know it's not resignation, it's not liking the difficult stuff, so what is it?
In ACT, acceptance is an act of choice. It's willingly making room for uncomfortable thoughts, feelings, sensations, memories, without struggling with them, trying to change them or push them away. It's the direct opposite of experiential avoidance.
Avoidance is fighting against it, acceptance is opening up to it.
Precisely. And crucially, this willingness isn't the end goal, it's a means to an end. You make space for the discomfort so that you can take action aligned with your values. You accept the anxiety so that you can give the important presentation.
Again, very counterintuitive. Our culture screams, fix it, get rid of it. How do metaphors help here?
They're essential for bypassing that fix-it mind. One powerful one is the tug of war with a monster. Imagine you're pulling on a rope against a big, scary monster. Your anxiety, depression, whatever. There's a pit between you. The harder you pull to defeat it, the harder it pulls back. And you're stuck, exhausted, right at the edge of the pit.
The struggle keeps you trapped.
Exactly. The only way to win is to do the counterintuitive thing. Drop the rope. Let go of the struggle. The monster might still be there, but it can't pull you into the pit if you're not pulling back. Disengage from the fight.
Wow. So freedom comes from letting go of the rope, not winning the pull.
That's the insight. Another related one is the struggle switch. Imagine an internal switch. Difficult feeling arises. Switch flips on, and you start the secondary struggle. I hate this. Go away. Why me? This adds that dirty discomfort. ACT teaches you to notice the switch is on in and consciously choose to flip it off at.
So the original feeling, the clean discomfort, might still be there.
It might. But the suffering about the feeling, the struggle, diminishes. You choose not to add that extra layer.
I've also heard the quicksand metaphor struggle makes you sink, relaxing helps you float, and the unwelcome party guest.
Yes. Imagine you're having a party representing your life, and an annoying guest shows up, maybe Mr. Self-Doubt. You could spend the whole party trying to kick him out, arguing with him, missing all the fun, or you could acknowledge he's there, maybe nod, and then turn your attention back to your friends, to what makes the party worthwhile.
You don't have to like the guest, but you don't have to let them ruin the party.
Exactly. You choose where to put your energy. Practically, acceptance exercises often involve mindfully noticing where you feel an emotion in your body. Maybe breathing into that sensation, allowing it to be there without needing it to change. It's about turning towards the discomfort, making space.
Which feels brave, actually.
It is. It requires willingness.
Now, closely related is cognitive diffusion. If fusion is being stuck to our thoughts, diffusion is unsticking.
That's a good way to think about it. Diffusion techniques aim to change your relationship with thoughts, altering their unhelpful influence rather than their content. The goal is to see thoughts for what they are. Just words, images, bits of language passing through your mind, not literal truths or commands.
So the thought, I'm a failure, can still occur.
It can. But through diffusion, it loses its punch. It becomes less believable, less powerful in dictating how you feel or act. You see it as just a thought, not a fact about who you are. You create distance.
How do we actually do that? What are some diffusion techniques?
There are many, often quite creative. A very simple one is just labeling the process. Instead of, I can't do this, you notice, I'm having the thought that I can't do this. That little preface creates instant separation.
Puts you back in the observer seat.
Exactly. Visualization helps too. Imagine thoughts as leaves floating down a stream or clouds drifting across the sky. You just watch them pass by without grabbing onto them.
Takes away their urgency.
Yes. And some techniques playfully alter the form of the thought. You could try singing a worry thought, I'm gonna mess up, to the tune of happy birthday. Or pick a difficult word like anxiety and repeat it rapidly out loud for 30 seconds until it becomes just a meaningless sound. The milk, milk, milk idea.
That sounds odd, but I can see how it would strip the word of its power.
It really can. Or imagine hearing a critical thought in a silly cartoon voice. It makes it harder to take the thought quite so literally or seriously. It highlights the arbitrary nature of thought. It's just mental noise sometimes.
What about thanking your mind? That sounds gentler.
It is. When a critical or unhelpful thought pops up, you might internally say, thanks mind for trying to protect me, or thanks for that interesting thought. It acknowledges the mind's presence, maybe even its good intentions, like trying to warn you of danger, without buying into the content. It fosters a more compassionate stance.
Less like an enemy, more like an overzealous friend.
Something like that. And physicalizing helps too, giving a thought or feeling a shape, color, texture. Maybe imagining placing it outside yourself, like putting an anxiety blob on the chair next to you. It makes the abstract concrete and observable.
So diffusion is about unhooking, creating space, seeing thoughts as thoughts, not commands or reality itself.
Okay, let's pivot towards action. The next pillar is values. How does ACT define values? It seems different from just setting goals. It is different, and the distinction is crucial. In ACT, values are your chosen life directions. They're qualities of ongoing action, like verbs being loving, being curious, being courageous, being connected. They answer the question, what do you want your life to stand for? What really matters deep down?
So not destinations, but the direction of travel.
Exactly. Values are like choosing to head west. You can always head west, moment by moment. Goals are like specific destinations on that westward journey reaching California, say.
Yeah.
You can achieve a goal, check it off. You never finish living a value. Being a loving partner is a value. Planning a date night is a goal that serves that value.
And values provide the why, the motivation for facing discomfort.
Absolutely. They give meaning to the struggle.
Yeah.
Why would you be willing to feel anxious? Acceptance while giving a speech? Committed action. Because you value contribution or sharing your ideas. Values fuel willing action.
How do we figure out what our values actually are? Sometimes they feel buried.
ACT uses several clarification exercises. One classic is the 80th birthday speech or tombstone exercise. Imagine it's your 80th birthday, or look back from the end of your life. What would you want loved ones to honestly say about how you lived? What qualities would you hope they saw? What impact did you have?
That really cuts through the noise, doesn't it?
It does. It forces a focus on what truly matters in the bigger picture. We also might explore values across different life domains, relationships, work career, personal growth, health, community. Are your actions aligned with what you care about in each area?
Looking for the gaps.
Or the consistencies? Another approach is the top 10 moments exercise. Reflect on times you felt most alive, most fulfilled. What values were you living out in those moments? Connection, creativity, adventure, learning.
Finding values in lived experience. And what about the alternative miracle question? How does that help?
Yes. Instead of asking, if a miracle happened and your problem disappeared, what would be different? Which can keep the focus on the problem, ACT might ask. If the struggle you're dealing with wasn't dominating your life, wasn't taking up so much space, what would you put your energy into? What would you start or do more of? What kind of person would you be?
So it shifts from problem removal to valued living. What would you move toward?
Exactly. It points towards the life waiting to be lived beyond the struggle.
Which leads directly to the final pillar, committed action. This is where it all comes together in behavior, right? Doing the things that matter.
This is absolutely where the rubber meets the road. Committed action is about taking effective, value-guided action step by step, even when difficult thoughts and feelings show up. It's the behavioral expression of psychological flexibility.
And all the other processes support this.
They work in synergy. You clarify a value, like being supportive. That leads to a committed action, like calling my struggling friend. As you go to dial, anxiety thoughts might arise. What if I say the wrong thing? You need acceptance, willingness to feel the anxiety, and diffusion, seeing the thoughts as just thoughts, not commands to hang up, supported by present moment awareness, staying grounded, and self as context, remembering you are not your anxiety. That allows you to make the call.
It's a dynamic dance between all six.
Silly.
How do we make these actions concrete, going from I value connection to actually connecting?
We often use goal-setting strategies like SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant to values, and time-framed. And a key tool is the willingness and action plan.
Tell me more about that.
It's a structured way to plan. You identify a specific goal linked to a value, you outline the concrete action steps, and this is crucial. You identify the difficult thoughts, feelings, or sensations you anticipate might show up, and you explicitly state your willingness to make room for them in order to take the action.
So you plan for the internal obstacles too.
Yes. It acknowledges they'll likely be there and prepares you to proceed anyway. It's about saying, I'm willing to feel X in order to do Y because I value Z.
I know someone who wanted to start a YouTube channel about their passion, but kept getting stuck on thoughts like, nobody will watch, or I'll look stupid. How would ACT help with that paralysis?
That's a perfect example for the demons on the boat metaphor. Imagine your life is a ship, and you're the captain. You've set a course towards your valued destination, launching the channel. But as soon as you set sail, these unwelcome passengers, these demons, climb aboard. Nobody cares. You'll fail. You're an imposter.
They're loud and distracting.
Very. Your instinct might be to fight them, try to throw them overboard, or even turn the ship around just to shut them up. But the demons are persistent. Fighting them just means you're wrestling, not steering. The boat stops.
So you're stuck arguing with the demons instead of sailing.
Right. The ACT insight is, you don't have to get rid of the demons to steer the ship. If you're willing to let them be there, accept their noisy presence on board, you can still keep your hands firmly on the wheel and keep sailing towards your destination. Your friend could film the video while the nobody will watch thought is yelling. The thought doesn't control the camera.
Willingness to have the demons on board so you can keep moving. That really clarifies it. Now, this sounds a bit like exposure therapy facing things you fear. How is it different?
Good question. There's overlap in behavior. Both involve contacting difficult situations. but the purpose and framing are different. Traditional exposure often aims primarily to reduce the fear response through habituation. You do it until it's not scary anymore.
Make the fear go away.
Yes. In ACT, while fear might reduce, the main goal isn't symptom reduction per se. It's framed as a willingness practice in the service of values. The question isn't just, can you tolerate this, but are you willing to feel this anxiety if it means doing what matters to you? It makes confronting the fear a choice aligned with your values, expanding your life. Even if the fear lingers, it's about living bigger, not just feeling less scared.
We've used so many metaphors today: tug of war, the chessboard, demons on the boat. They seem absolutely central to ACT, not just helpful illustrations. Why is that?
You're right, they're core interventions. They function almost like, well, a Trojan horse. Our literal analytical mind, the part that loves to argue and problem solve, is often the part that gets us stuck. Direct instructions like just accept it can get caught in that analytical filter and debated endlessly.
The mind argues back.
Exactly. Metaphors, though, tend to bypass that literal mind. They speak more directly to our lived experience, creating understanding from a different angle, almost a felt sense. They're memorable, they resonate, and they offer a new way of seeing things without triggering immediate resistance. They plant a seed of different understanding.
Like giving you a new lens to look through. One of the most well-known must be the passengers on the bus metaphor. Can you unpack that one? It seems to tie a lot together.
It does. Imagine you're the driver of a bus your life. Your values determine the direction you want to head. But as you drive, various passengers get on your thoughts, feelings, memories, urges. Some are pretty unruly. Anxiety yelling directions, self-doubt criticizing your driving, anger demanding you stop.
Annoying passengers.
Definitely. Your instinct might be to argue with them, try to kick them off, or even stop the bus until they quiet down. But in this metaphor, you can't actually kick them off. And struggling with them just means you're not driving, you're distracted, maybe even crashing. The passengers, however noisy, don't actually have control of the steering wheel, the accelerator, or the brakes unless you give it to them by engaging in the fight.
So your job as the driver
Is to acknowledge the passengers are there, maybe hear their noise, but keep your hands on the wheel, your eyes on the road, and keep driving the bus in your chosen valued direction. You don't have to like the passengers, but you don't have to obey them or stop the journey because of them.
that beautifully integrates acceptance, diffusion, values, and committed action. Keep driving towards what matters, even with the noise. Now, ACT is known for being transdiagnostic. What does that mean?
It means it doesn't have dozens of separate protocols for different diagnostic labels like depression, anxiety, OCD, etc. Instead, it targets the underlying core processes believed to contribute to many different forms of suffering, primarily psychological inflexibility, driven by things like experiential avoidance and cognitive fusion.
So the skills are broadly applicable.
Exactly. Whether someone is struggling with chronic pain, social anxiety, or workplace burnout, the ACT model suggests the underlying dynamics of getting stuck are often similar. The Hexaflex offers a unified set of skills relevant across that spectrum. The fact that it works across such diverse problems really validates the model. It suggests these core processes are fundamental.
And this isn't just a nice idea. ACT is heavily researched, right? An evidence-based practice.
Oh, absolutely. There's a huge and growing body of research, hundreds of randomized controlled trials. For anxiety disorders, meta-analyses show it's significantly better than doing nothing, often performs as well as traditional CBT, and can be particularly helpful for those who didn't click with CBT's focus on changing thought content.
And for depression.
Strong evidence there, too. Effective in reducing symptoms, boosting psychological flexibility, and importantly, the effects tend to hold up long-term. It helps people get unstuck from the battle with low mood.
What about chronic pain? That affects so many.
ACT has strong research support
Yeah.
from the APA for chronic pain. The focus isn't eliminating pain, often impossible, but changing the relationship with pain to improve quality of life and functioning. Studies show increases in pain acceptance, flexibility, daily activity, and reductions in related depression and anxiety. It helps people live well with pain.
It really seems applicable across the board.
It does. There's solid evidence for its use in psychosis. One study even showed it halved rehospitalization rates. Also effective for substance use, workplace stress, eating disorders, even helping people cope with the distress of terminal illness. Finding meaning in incredibly difficult circumstances. Its range is quite remarkable. Hashtag tag tag out check outro.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into acceptance and commitment therapy, The takeaway message really isn't about finding a magic bullet to eliminate life's difficulties.
No, not at all.
It's more about learning how to make room for them, how to carry them with you, while still building a life that feels rich, full, and guided by what truly matters to you. Living with the hard stuff, not waiting until after it's gone.
That's it exactly. The 6 hexaflex processes: acceptance, diffusion, presence, self as context, values, and action. They're skills you cultivate. Together, they build that psychological flexibility, empowering you to navigate your inner world with more openness, awareness, and purpose. It's about actively choosing your direction, moment by moment.
It reminds me of that powerful quote from Viktor Frankl. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom.
And ACT is really about learning how to access and use that space. In that gap between an impulse, a difficult feeling, a harsh thought, and your reaction, what could you choose? Could you choose curiosity, self-compassion? Could you choose an action, however small, that moves you towards your values, even if it feels hard?
It brings to mind something Dr. Hayes said, reflecting on his own journey, that maybe love isn't everything, it's the only thing. Perhaps meaning a loving, accepting stance towards our whole experience, pain included.
That loving stance towards oneself, towards the fullness of our human experience, might just be the deepest wellspring of meaning and purpose. So the question we leave you with is, in that space between stimulus and response, what will you choose?
Embrace the vastness, feel the air. In every heartbeat, know you're aware. Let go the struggle, find peace inside. In this quiet, let your spirit reside. So linger in stillness, let thoughts unwind. In sacred silence,